shades of night are falling. It's twilight time. Out of the mist your voice is calling. 'Tis twilight time. When purple-colored curtains mark the end of day, I'll hear you, my dear, at twilight time.
Well, here we are with our Lesson 3 installment of Twilight Garden. I'm Gayle from BERNINA of Naperville, and I'm going to take you through, some special techniques that we pulled from the lessons that you're watching on the BERNINA Skill Hub for Twilight Garden. So we got a new instructor this time. We have Haley, and Haley is taking you through doing the stitch designer. And you're going to do it a couple different ways. You're going to do an original design that your little finger creates, and then you're going to do another one where you take two stitches, put them together to create something totally unique. Now, by now, last month's lesson, you learned how to do the sideways motion, or as us old-timers call it, multi-direction stitching, right? And some of you took to it like, a duck to water. But others of you, may not enjoy it very much. And I've got 3 of these quilts to make, so I've got lots to do and little time to do it in. So I'm going to show you how to do your design one-of-a-kind stitches that you're going to do in the Skill Hub lesson and convert it over to embroidery. Now, BERNINA hasn't showed you the embroidery yet, and some of you, I hope you're not using Twilight Garden as your, mastery classes for this, because by now I would hope that you would know how to attach your embroidery module and all of that stuff, so I'm not going to do that. If you need to learn how to do that, then you need to watch your mastery class on the BERNINA Skill Hub that you got with your BERNINA 990, or, of course, go to your local BERNINA dealer for sales and service and take your mastery classes. They are just eager to see you in person in the store. Okay, so with that said, let's head over to the presentation deck that you're going to get from me. I've got lots of goodies for you this month, and this is a quick little exercise. I hope there's a lot of playing around in the brains of the sewing and the embroidery side. So we're going to spend a lot of time with me using my simulator, and that is kind of like something I have on my computer. That's the operating system for the 990. It's just a clearer way for you to see exactly what I'm doing. And I also want to remind you that if you have a mouse for your BERNINA 990, it doesn't have to be a special mouse. It can be any mouse. It can be your favorite computer mouse. You can actually plug a mouse into your computer, and it will put a little arrow over the screen just like you're working with your computer. That could be very handy today. So, are you ready to get started? Well, choppity chop chop, let's do it. Well, now, since we're in lesson 3, there's no secret that I put together like a little presentation deck for you where you have links to view the high-res version of the original quilt that the Twilight Garden series is built on. So this one isn't a replica of what we're making, it's the inspiration piece. I always spell out what you can expect from lesson 3. I won't regurgitate this to you because I know you know how to read, but essentially on the BERNINA Skill Hub, that lesson is broken into 2 parts: designing and stitching, and then assembly and troubleshooting. And we have essentially 3 blocks that we're making. And if you're making the large block, that's going to be block 18, block 34, and block 34 also has another little unit down here as well. And then there's block 44, which has no embellishment. Now for the small quilt, you can just simply skip that plain block because you're doing just one segment of the larger project. I've added just a couple more supplies. We're going to use a 10D foot for our special project, and we're using our giant hoop, and we're using our embroidery module this month. But you know what? You can handle it. I believe in you. And then, I wanted to kind of give you something a little bit extra. So I prepped a little lesson on Stitch Designer. This has nothing to do with anything that we're doing for Twilight Garden, other than a little bit of a deeper dive on Stitch Designer if you wanted to do something like your signature, for instance. So if you are interested in watching that, all you have to do is click the little arrow on page 8 of your presentation deck, and that will take you right there to that video.
Likewise, I have also made Stitch Designer videos with the B79 and the 790 and the 880. And I also made a special video where we use our Bernina embroidery software to create stitches that we can stitch out on the machine. We're also going to be using built-in templates on your Bernina. This is special on the 990, and what's really nice about this is that these templates are in BQM version, which means that we can resize them very large, very small, all of those good things, but it's also going to act as a placement and a tack down stitch for us as we import our decorative stitches into our embroidery. Also, we're going to be importing stitches this month, and that's different than just picking in your embroidery side the decorative stitches. This is where your machine is going to remember the last stitch, the way that you adjusted it, and everything that was on your sewing side when you toggled back to embroidery. So that's kind of a cool thing. And then, once again, I have some different little exercises that we're going to do depending on what stitch it is that you're using. So why don't we go ahead and get over to our machine and just roll up our sleeves and get on this, right? So for our example, I'm going to hoop only one layer of the Ultra Clean and Tear in our giant hoop. And you're going to need one layer of Ultra Clean and Tear per decorative stitch. So we're going to do like the leaves in a circle in one hoop, and we're going to do the orange peel in another. So there's two pieces of each one of those.
Okay, so for those of you that are curious, so I'm working on our earth colorway today, and I've got a 40 weight that is kind of blending with the rest of the threads that I'm going to use. So 40 weight in the bobbin, and then in the top I'm using my 28 weight thread. And I'm using a combination of these. And of course, in the presentation deck, I've got the exact colors that I'm using. So if you are a rule follower, you can check that out. But this is what I'm going to be using for right now. So we're going to do the leaves in a circle. And this one is one where we can do the left side and the right side. We can do both together. And so I'm just going to thread up. We're using the earth colorway for this example. And this is the color. It's a wonderful terracotta rose kind of color. And for this example, I'm going to be using my darker, this is the 28 weight 2345 for this. So I'm going to thread this up, and this should be relatively painless.
Let's have a look at some of the things that are loaded onto your 990 that you might not have realized are there. I'm going to be working in the giant hoop. And this is how a crucial tool that you need if you're going to bring your Stitch Designer designs into your embroidery side and stitch them out, right? It's much faster, in my opinion. So let's have a look here. In your folders that are loaded in your embroidery side, you have a quilting folder. So let's go to embroidery designs and then to quilting. And there's a folder of templates. And there is a square that has sharp corners, and there's a square with round corners. Let's go look at our square with the pointy corners. One of the things that you're going to need to do, if you haven't already, is go into your little hamburger options here and go to settings and choose embroidery. And under embroidery, we want to make sure that our unit of measure is in inches and not millimeters. So let's pick inches. Now, let's go to Edit, Size, Resize, and we want to pay attention to this number right here. And we want to make sure that it says 3.5 by 13. So we're going to take off our proportion scaling and we're going to adjust this to 3.5. And I made a little error earlier. When you pick your hoop, you want to make sure that you pick it after you bring in your design because it's always going to choose the smallest hoop possible. So let me just do that real quick. Okay, so now we're going to take our length and we want to make this so that this says 13. So we want to say 3.5 by 13 inches. There we go. And now we want to save this. And I'm going to call it rectangle. And I want to save this in my Twilight Garden folder. And now this is literally the cut size of what we're going to be making. So we don't even have to really whip out our rotary cutter, right, to cut this down after we stitch. Okay, so now we have something kind of important and fun that I want to work with. I personally just have so many of these Twilight Garden quilts to make that I wanted to do something as streamlined as possible. And some of you may not enjoy the sideways motion stitching because you haven't done this very much or whatever. And the cool thing about the Bernina 990 is that there are so many awesome tools that we can do things so many different ways. So I am going to embroider these stitch combinations that you created in the Stitch Designer in the Bernina Skill Hub lessons with Haley. So we're going to start with opening up our personal folder because I saved the stitches like Haley recommended to us, right? And I'm going to start with this one. I'm calling this Leaf in a Circle, right? And here's our design. Now we can go over into our embroidery side right now. And we can choose that design because it puts it right in our personal folder. Now that's just one repetition. So I want to show you something really cool. So let's delete this. And let's go back to our sewing side. We have to pick our stitch again. And now let's go to our edit and let's talk about pattern repeat. Now, there is a little bit of something in here. Don't come after Bernina, nor please do not come after me. But when you create a stitch in the Stitch Designer, it only allows you to do 9 repetitions of something. But in this case, for this particular design, the leaf in a circle, 9 is the perfect amount. And so now we're going to say, okay. And now let's go back to our embroidery side. And now let's add that. And that is just about 13 inches by 1.5 inches, essentially, right? So we're working in our giant hoop. So I'm going to select that one. And now I want to kind of put my design, I want to stitch one here and one here. But there's something important that I want to do. And now from our little mini lesson when I talked about templates, I had you set up that template. Well, now we're going to add that template. There it is. And now we're going to select this and we're going to duplicate it. And now with this one, we're going to change the color. And I don't care what you change it to, any color. So now we have 3 layers now, right? And then of course, this, and this. I don't want this stitching order. So I want my decorative stitch to stitch last, even though that was the first thing I brought into the hoop. And this is the cool thing that I love about the 990 is I can click and hold, it turns white, and I can drag it to the top. And now I've changed our stitching order. Now, another thing that I want to do is select all, and we can do that simply by, clicking that last layer there. And now we want to use our alignment tools to align center vertical and center horizontal. And now I want to group this together. So let's group, and now it's all one layer. And I'm going to move this over to the side. Then I'm going to duplicate and move this over to the side so I can stitch both of my designs at one time. Okay, so now that we've picked the design and we're ready to stitch, we're going to keep everything pretty much the same. The only thing that I want you to do is select Reduce Thread Changes, because Reduce Thread Changes is going to stitch each placement stitch, and then it will do each tack down stitch together and each decorative stitch together.
And so before we get started, we're just going to simply stitch color number 1. And color number 1 is the first template shape that we brought in. And all this is creating a placement stitch. And I'm doing 2 in 1 hooping. And as I told you earlier, I'm recommending that you do the reduced thread changes. So what's going to happen is it's going to stitch our placement stitch on the left side, and then it's going to stitch our placement stitch on the right side. So what we're going to do is we're going to give it a little squirty McSquirt here with our 505 spray. I know some of you are clutching your pearls seeing me just squirt near the machine like this, but take a deep breath, everybody. So I'm going to place one of my 5-inch by 15-inch-ish, over these spots. And now we're going to stitch color number 2, which is the tack down stitch for these. Now, another thing that you need to remember is that this is going to be the cutting stitch. So ultimately, we're not going to see the stitching, so everything's cool. But we want to hold this into place so everything is awesome when we go to do our decorative stitching.
Some of you may be concerned too because you see some wrinkles on my fabric there. Yes, I probably should have pressed this before I started stitching, but I did press it out and it's not there now. You'll see it when I do the reveal.
And now the star of our show, leaf in a circle.
Okay, so now that we have our pieces done, we can remove them from the hoop. And this is the important part for those of you that are little frugal fannies. Okay, so we have a lot of extra stabilizer under here and we're going to use it. Don't you worry. So this outline that's stitched here is our cutting line. And so look at all this stabilizer that we have. We're going to use this to make our Scandinavian heart. All right. So now these should measure ultimately 3.5 inches by 13 inches. And then you can remove your stabilizer. Okay, so we did our leaf and circle. Now let's do the Let's call this one the orange peel. Okay, that one's saved over in my personal folder under Twilight Garden. And once again, I mentioned to you, I warned you that we can only do up to 9 repeats. Well, I determined that 7 repeats will work for this application. Now, this one is a little bit more complex, so, but it's still fine. We're going to learn some new features with this one. So we're going to start with going over into our embroidery side. And we're going to select our design. Remember, we're working with our giant hoop, so we want to pick the giant hoop. And I'm going to use Endless Embroidery. Endless Embroidery is under Edit. It's down here. And we want to remove our reference markers. But 4 repetitions is fine. Let's just go ahead and say OK. And this is actually a little bit larger than we need. So let's undo. And let's see what 3 repetitions does. Let's go down here to Endless Embroidery. My reference markers have already been removed. There's 3 repetitions. Now let's say OK. And now this one is 11.7. So in this case, for this one, I might need to either add one more little thing. Let's do 8 repetitions of this and see what happens. So let's just delete, go back to our sewing side. And this is, we can't really give you a determined amount of repetitions for this because we're all drawing these ourselves, right? So it might be different depending on how large you drew your orange peel. So let's pick it again by going to our favorites. And now let's do 8 repetitions. Now we go over to the embroidery side. Now we select it again. Pick that giant hoop. And now let's do 3 repetitions in Endless Embroidery. And now this is perfect. It's 13.4, but I'm fine with cutting some off ultimately. So now what we want to do is save this. I just want to save this design. So we're going to go to our little download folder. This is Twilight Garden, lesson 3, and this is design A. Perfect. Now with this in place, I'm going to go ahead and delete it. There's a method to my madness, everybody. Now let's pick that template that we made. Go back to our giant hoop. And now let's insert this. And now we want 3 of these. So we're going to duplicate and duplicate. And now I want to select all 3 of these. So we're going to do select sum. And we're going to use our alignment tools to align these to the top. And now I want to deselect. And I want to kind of get them somewhat close together, about like that, right? Well, now let's select them all. I'm going to show you a cool tool. So now look, did you know that you can distribute these evenly, like so? And once again, we can align the top, and we could even scooch them in a little bit closer if we wanted. Now, when I stitch this out, it's going to look a little bit different because I had to draw this on my Bernina 990 for stitching it out. I'm working in the simulator because we don't have as much glare and you can really see what I'm touching. So don't be discouraged if my actual stitch out doesn't look quite like what you're seeing here, okay? Now, this is grouped together, but we might consider scooching these even closer together. And you can see I accidentally made it wider. So let's just scooch, shall we? Remember, we're going to select some because we don't want to include that rectangle down there. And now let's distribute horizontally. And let's zoom in. I think that was too much. So let's select one. Let's move it over just a little bit. There we go. Now let's select them. Select some and distribute. Oh, I love that. That's perfect. And then I once again want to make sure that they're aligned perfectly at the top. Now let's group our configuration, but only after we change the center color to anything. So I'm going to save it as something orange and just touch, make it orange, touch, and make it orange. Like so. And now we are going to select some, and we're going to group. Now we want to select one, and we want to select our template, and we want to duplicate that and make this any old color. Let's make it green. And now I want to click and hold it and drag it to the first position. And now we're going to select all. And we're going to go over here now to our alignment. And we're going to center vertical and center horizontal.
So for this example, I'm going to be using a lighter mauve color, which is 2375 in the 28 weight, and then a slightly darker version of that in the 28 weight, which is 6728. And once again, this is our earth colorway. The rest of the colorways I have spelled out in your presentation deck. Now with this one, because it's a little bit more complicated, we're going to simply move it over to the side and we're going to stitch this left side first, let it finish, then we're going to stitch it on the other side. And now we're going to stitch our placement stitch. And we're going to give it a little squirty McSquirtson with our 505 spray. Okay, so now we're going to stitch the right and left columns. And now let's go back. And now let's just move it over to this side. without a red ring, please. And now we're ready to stitch again. And now just so that you feel comfortable, another thing that I want you to make sure you have for all of these exercises is your jump stitch at 6mm threshold. Okay? No worries. All right, so now we're going to do our placement stitch.
Okay, so now that we have our pieces done, we can remove them from the hoop, and then you can remove your stabilizer. But don't worry about the stabilizer in between here. That can stay. We're just worried about this extra stuff.
So, I always like to give you an additional little project. And with this being December's lesson, I couldn't help myself. I thought we could make a little ornament and a little gift to give, whether it's, Christmas that you celebrate, or Hanukkah, or just the holiday season itself. You might be looking for some little gifts. So, this was my little trial. I kind of did some tests to figure out the perfect way to make this using one of the stitches that you created this month. So let's get to it.
All right, so what is our bonus project? Well, I let it slip earlier, but it's a Scandinavian heart ornament. Now, this is straight off of We All Sew's blog. This weallsew.com is Bernina's blog where, they have all kinds of contributors that, design projects, write instructions for them and everything. And this is one that through the years has been a relatively popular project for this time of year, Valentine's Day and Christmas and things like that. And they have two versions. They have one that's not stitched, one that's stitched, and this one is pretty fancy. What I do want to tell you is we're not going to do the stitching like they do in this blog post. We're going to stitch our straps or our little bands or whatever. We're going to stitch those, and then this part of our heart is going to be plain. Also, I have done ours a little bit different. They sew tubes and then turn the tubes. What I want you to do is cut 3" by 7" pieces. You're going to need 4 of those per color. So you can see here I have my green and my orange colorway, and then I also have the little light blue and Cozumel color from the coastal colorway. So you're going to cut 4 of each of those colors, 3" by 7", and then you're going to cut 4 of the template from each pattern. And so I do highly recommend that you download our embroidery file right here if you want to do this, because it's super easy to do this with the embroidery. You get a perfect curve every time. You're also going to need those scraps of Ultra Clean and Tear Stabilizer that we cut off of our pieces that we made for our main block. And then probably about a 5" by 9" batting scrap. In the blog post, they're interfacing these pieces, but I'm using a little bit of batting instead. And so we're going to go to the iron and we're going to take those 3" by 7" pieces and we're going to press them in half. Then we're going to press the little raw edges to the center and press again so that you have a 3/4 of an inch strip. This is kind of like you would make a purse handle or something like that. Then once you do that, you're going to take your folded piece. So now we have folds instead of drawn chalk lines. And we are going to align our stitching to be just to the right of the center crease. And our little orange peel stitch is going to be the perfect stitch to put in there. And you can please be creative with your colors. Pick stuff that's going to make you happy. Don't pick stuff based on what I'm doing, okay? Let's get started.
Okay, so I've selected the little pickle dish stitch that we created with Haley, and I've got my Coastal Vibes 28 weight number 2435 thread
through the needle the 40 multi-direction or sideways motion foot installed on the machine, and then I've got the matching 40 weight thread for this background fabric here in the bobbin. I've engaged my camera so I can line up that stitching right through those fold creases, so I know exactly what I'm doing. And for added help, you could even activate your laser there.
And then we're going to do 8 of these little pieces that are ultimately going to be trimmed down to 6.5 inches. But we've got 4 in one colorway with the pink kind of thread stitching, and then we're going to do a lighter one with maybe dark stitching or whatever. But you're going to make sure that ultimately you make enough of these little strips that you can have 8 6.5 inch strips at the end. So once you've stitched, you can see I've completed the stitching on the darker color here. You're going to remove the stabilizer, and I removed it to about that degree. So let's go ahead and do that. And now I'm going to keep the pieces here and we're going to press them in just a moment.
Now I'm using foot number 10D that has this like little blade that's like a guide in the middle, and I'm going to move. Well, first I'm going to select stitch number 1302. It's from my quilting side in the stitches, and it's just a straight stitch that's a little bit longer in length. It's 3 millimeters, and I'm going to move that needle position 3 or 2 notches from center. Once that's in place, I'm going to align my piece, and I'm sewing the 2 folded edges first, and I'm going to just stitch right along the edge, doing a little top stitch.
And now we're simply going to trim our pieces to 6.5 inch pieces. Okay, so for the next phase of our little ornament, we're going to hoop up 1 layer of poly mesh stabilizer. Now, if you really wanted to, you could use your ultra clean and tear for this. And I'm using a maxi hoop because I've created an embroidery design of this template that you can download from your presentation deck. And I thought it was easier to just stitch these out in embroidery. So we're also going to need just a little scrap of batting. So I'm just going to cut that here. We don't need quite this much, but we have so many pieces of batting left over from our long arm. You use more than you need, and then you have these weird little pieces. Okay, so we're going to bring this over to the machine.
So I'm using my 40 weight thread in the black bobbin because we're simulating construction here, no decorative stitching. And then I have the same 40 weight thread through my needle. 26 foot goes on. And we're choosing the design that I sent to my machine, which is our little semicircles here. Keep everything the same. The only thing is, if you want, you can reduce thread changes. So all of our placement stitches will stitch out together. Now, I've cut little swatches here of my Cozumel And that's going to go here. I want to at least have, I want to have a, a generous 1/4 of an inch under my piece there like that. And I'm going to stop it once it's over to this side. I'm going to stop my machine. And now I'm going to put this into place with the same generous 1/4 of an inch seam allowance down here. Oops. And now we're going to lay this into position. This is a new color now. This matches the other strips that we created with that decorative stitched orange peel.
I know the way that I did this, there was a lot of waste, but you know, in your instructions, I have you cutting a smaller piece of batting and whatever. It's a snowstorm going on right now, and I'm filming this at home. And quite honestly, I could have gone to the store to get a smaller hoop, which I don't have here with me, but you know, I'm making do here. So I'm sure you've all been in this position before as well. So let's trim this. And when we trim the top part, the curved part, we're going to have that be about 1/8 of an inch as we go around here, like this. Okay, perfect. Now we're going to turn this over and we're going to trim. See how I'm folding this flap even with that stitching line like so? Now we're going to trim the batting and the stabilizer right on that line. And we're going to press this piece perfectly straight and up like this. Like so. And that's way more than a 1/4 of an inch, by the way, but it doesn't really matter. We can even, if you wanted at this point, use our ruler to trim a 1/4 of an inch from the bottom there, like so. Now we're going to turn this inside out. And I'm just going to hit this with the iron for a moment. And now we have 4 little strips that we made here. And we're going to pin these into position. Side by side, and we really have to butt these guys up side by side. You want to evenly distribute them, so double check on the back side and all of that good stuff. This one fell down. Okay, and then we're gonna treat all of these pieces here like we did this little guy. So give me just a moment while I cut the rest of these out. Then we can trim our 1/4 of an inch again. And we're going to pin this guy into position. Okay, so now we're going to stitch right on that little drawn line there, or not drawn line, but stitch line, and make the other piece in just the same manner.
So the 10D foot is on, straight stitch number 1, center needle position, and my laser guide is on so I can see exactly where that needle is going to land. So now I'm going to stitch a couple stitches backwards, a couple stitches forwards, removing my pin, removing my pins as I go along. And now I'm going to do the same thing on this side that we did before. So with this stitched together, we tuck these little edges under that folded piece and we're gonna top stitch. So what I like to do is trim this corner just a little bit like this. Same on the other side, just to kind of alleviate some of that bulk. And now we're gonna give this a good pressing. And if you don't want to see any top stitching, you could hand stitch this area, but I'm going to top stitch. So to top stitch, I'm going to go into my history stitches and I'm going to pick that 1302. This time though, I do want my needle position 3 clicks to the left of center. Okay, so now let's stitch, lining that guide right in the center there. Got one more little stitch to do there on the corner. There we go. And then I'll repeat on the other side.
Okay, now that we have our 2 pieces made, I think they look like little jellyfish. We're going to slip one in like this, slip this in. There are diagrams in the blog post for this, so it could take you a couple tries, but this is pretty easy. So now this one goes inside, like so. So see how we're getting that weave going? And so now it's time to put this guy inside and this guy inside. We're getting there, we're getting there. And now this one, we just have to start snugging these. There we go. So then this is going to go in here. No, this one goes on the outside. This one goes inside. Up and over, up and over. And now we're going to slip this guy in here. Kind of like making a pot holder, if you did that as kids or as an adult. Okay, so get everything in there like that. So now this one is going to go in here. And then this one goes through here. Here we go. And then this one goes over and through. And you just have to not be afraid to tug. Okay. Because we've got one more of these to go. See how that works there as you start using it, you start to get more space. So now this one goes in here. And I have little tweezers handy because my fingers feel a little too fat to fit through there. There we go. That one goes under. And then you're just going to kind of feel like you're constantly pulling at this until everything is together. So don't worry. We do a lot of tweaking. Okay, and I'm going to give it a little pressing. Now, all we need to do is fasten a little hanging tie here. And even if you want a little decoration or a tassel or something like that, but I'm just simply going to stitch a little ribbon into position on both of my pieces.
Well, I hope that you had a good time with us today. I certainly really love exploring the different possibilities for this quilt and everything, and I hope that you do too. So we've got, several more lessons ahead of us. We've got the holidays to celebrate and all kinds of stuff. So I will meet you back here in January for lesson 4, and I just can't wait. I hear we're doing pin tucks and other things, so that should be fun, right? All right, so if you want to see more videos like this one or funny ones or whatever, don't forget to check out our Bernina of Naperville YouTube channel. It's easy. It's youtube.com/Bernina of Naperville, and there you can like, comment, and subscribe. So long. Happy holidays.
Each day I pray for evening just to be with you. Together at last at twilight time. Together at last at twilight.